I have two different jobs, so I'll describe both of them.
That's great.
At Autodesk, I'm responsible for corporate strategy, and there are really two aspects to that, to my role. One's the traditional corporate strategy role of working with the various business units and the CEO and the other business leaders around what is Autodesk strategy, what is the strategy of each business unit, and how does it relate going forward to a long-term vision. The other part, which is what most of my team does, is really looking at long-term directions that affect Autodesk and affect our customers. So we really try to engage in conversations with, the way we say is we try to engage in the conversations with the right people at the right time, the right topics. And what we're trying to do is to understand where society is moving, where technology is moving, where design is moving. And that does two things. One, it feeds back into our direction because it helps us shape the corporate strategy, but also engages with our customers and industry leaders to really help them understand where we're going. So there's sort of an inbound aspect to this of us understanding better, but there's an outbound aspect to this of people understanding us better, if that makes sense. So that's the role at Autodesk. The role at Berkeley is I teach in the business school, and I really try to teach, some people would call it design thinking. We'll get to that term in a little while. I really try to give my students two things. One, an appreciation of what design is and its strategic value, and then actually some experience in doing design. So the question is, how would I define innovation? Before I do that, let me tell you how I wouldn't define innovation. So I'll do that from the negative, but there is a definition I use. I think a lot of times people confuse invention with innovation. So I'll define invention as the creation of a new and novel approach. In fact, the dictionary definition is something like that, a novel approach or method or process. Innovation is really taking that and making it socially useful. Whether it's useful to a company from a profitability standpoint, whether it's useful from a social responsibility standpoint, making it somehow useful to society. And we often conflate the two. And it's very interesting in conversations. I was in a Chief Strategy Officer roundtable a couple of weeks ago, and the very first thing we talked about was we defined invention and innovation. Then the rest of the conversation, people kept confusing the two. So if you look at the U.S., a lot of the national dialogue is about gee, we need more math and science and more patents and those kinds of things. And those are necessary ingredients, but they don't necessarily drive innovation. So they're inputs to innovation, but they are a little bit to Autodesk. So our vision as a company is to help people imagine, design, and create a better world. And we deliberately used a better world because I think a better world, the notion of a better world captures value quite nicely. It's very broad. So while some of our employees are very focused on making video games, their definition of a better world might be we entertain. We help people relax and enjoy themselves, although some of the games may not be that relaxing, but to a certain demographic. A whole nother group of people might say, gee, we're making the world a more sustainable place because we're focusing on sustainable design. Another group might be focused on, gee, we're helping our customers be more profitable. So I think the value of innovation, the value of design, is a very broad sense. It's in some ways it's what's meaningful to the audience or the receiver. But I would contrast. I mean, I was educated as a designer, as an architect. And one of the things that happens in the design world, or the popular view of design, is people often conflate art and design. And so I would say art is about self-expression. Design, you always have an end user in mind or a socially useful purpose in mind. So when you talk about value, it's more than self-expression. It has something to do with a purpose that someone has, whether it's to occupy a shelter or to make a profit with a product or something like that. One of the things I tell my students on the first day of class is that in every job I've held, not every job, but most of the important jobs I've held, the position didn't exist. It wasn't a position I applied for. It was either it was created for me or I created it. And they've all been kind of the same. They've all been around kind of what I do now, looking at future direction, trying to help organizations move beyond where they are today. And the reason I think that's happened is because I have had a broad design background. I've tied together design, business, and technology. So I think having this sort of eclectic set of skills and backgrounds helps think in this design thinking kind of way, this more open-ended way than a lot of people have. So I don't know that there's any big contribution. I actually see a lot of small contributions of having moved organizations toward in a direction they might not have gone otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. Fair.